It's okay to not feel okay all the time. And I'm a positive person. I'm learning that you don't always have to be positive. It's perfectly normal to feel inadequate at times, as everybody deals with demons, whether they are visible or not. What's going on? You're listening to episode 34 of the Perspective Podcast, and I'm your host, Scotty.D.Russell of Perspective Collective. This show is all about giving you a weekly push to pursue your best work and get through those moments in life where you're feeling invisible. I know it's not easy, but man, I promise you it's worth it, as I deal with the same things that you deal with. This episode is kind of a continuation of a conversation I started this past week at Crop Conference. So I got to speak at Crop, and my talk was about you are not alone and you are not invisible. And it was kind of a repurpose of episode 27, I believe it was, back in I believe it was February. But one of the things I wanted to get at is that you and I are human beings. And, I get a little bit real on this one of some things I dealt with a while back, and how I deal with anxiety as a creative. Like, I deal with it every day, and I think it's important for us to talk about it. Like, we're told that depression and anxiety are weaknesses, and, I'm here to tell you that it's not, and it's important to have the hard conversations. And that's what this is about today. It's solely me with my experiences and how I've responded, and maybe the way that I respond and approach things could maybe help you through some of these dark times as well. I'm not telling you this is the only way. I'm just telling you this is what worked for me. So let's get after it. Let's go. Four years ago, my girlfriend and I, which is now my wife Emily, we got into a smidgen of an argument late one night. Honestly, it was nothing, but when I got alone to get my mind right, I started feeling really weird. First off, my throat felt like it was swelling shut. Next, I had this overwhelming feeling of like I had a pallet of bricks on my chest. My heart felt like it was about to explode, and the room began to go black all around me. It was scary as shit, and it was safe to say that I was freaking out. And this led to Emily having to run me to the emergency room. So it turns out that I was having a massive panic attack. Looking back on it now, it seems a bit silly, but I thought I was dying. I swear, I thought I was dying. I think it was the stress and pressure I'd been putting on myself for years, and it finally just caught up to me, because I've always been one to pile my plate up high, have a lot of things going on at once, and I think it just finally caught up to me. For months after this panic attack, I kept this to myself, as I thought I was going crazy. I felt I would be considered weak, and any reputation I had built for myself would crumble. Sadly, I feel that many of us bottle up these demons as we pursue a creative career. At the end of the day, you're a human being. It's okay to not feel okay all the time. And I'm a positive person. I'm learning that you don't always have to be positive. It's perfectly normal to feel inadequate at times, as everybody deals with demons, whether they are visible or not. This episode is a friendly reminder that you're not alone with your struggles, and it's important to not suppress them. And it starts off by realizing that you're not a badass. Recently, I've been reading Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Honestly, it's really clarified this topic of vulnerability that I've dealt with in the past and continue to deal with in the present. The early years of my life getting bullied led to me thinking that I needed to be a badass in order to be cool. When I started getting prescribed medication to treat my anxiety 4 years ago, I felt like I would get torn into pieces if this side of me was exposed to the public. And the months I spent trying to hide it were the worst, as it tore me down from the inside out. It just kept spiraling more and more out of control. And the more I held it in and felt like I needed to struggle in silence, the more I was losing the game of controlling and winning my mind. I was letting those negative inner voices tell me whatever they wanted me to do, and I would give in. How I felt at the time reminds me of this quote from Mark in his book. The avoidance of suffering is a form of suffering. The avoidance of struggle is a struggle. This is what I believe many of us creatives do, is that we bottle up our emotions and we avoid the elephant in the room. In my moments of unhappiness, I realized that I finally had to ditch the armor, swallow my pride, and accept that I was not a badass. From there, I had to take action and respond by starting one of the hardest conversations of my life. I'm paraphrasing a bit from the book, but Mark also states something along the lines of, when you feel shitty, it's your brain telling you that there is a problem that's unresolved. Negative emotions are a call to action, and when you feel them, you're supposed to do something. The more I held in these emotions, the worse my issues got. However, I finally consulted a few close individuals around me who I know dealt with anxiety. What they had to say drastically changed my perspective on this matter. And having the hard talk and getting it off my chest let me know that I wasn't alone and that I wasn't crazy, even though sometimes I still feel a little crazy these days, but that's besides the point. What I'm trying to say is, the more I talked about it, the better I began to feel. About a month or so of talking it out with people, I brought it publicly to Facebook, and I began asking how other people, especially creatives, dealt with their anxiety. I really wasn't sure what to expect, but the empathetic and helpful responses I received blew my mind. I had around 100 comments of people stating how they fought it. And this ended up becoming a community of encouragement on that little status. All my friends from all different corners of the world, all in this one little area, picking each other up and, giving each other advice. And I was so blown away and so inspired that this ended up manifesting into a blog post, which I've listed in the show notes. I hope that this blog post will, stumble across someone who is needing it the most and needing that boost to know that they're not alone. I feel by sparking that little conversation over on Facebook, it let more people than just myself find a little bit more peace in battling their demons. Accept it, my friend, that you are human. As a creative, I still deal with anxiety every day. Honestly, it's every day I still deal with it. My biggest fear isn't to put out a podcast and be judged or to stand on stage in front of hundreds of people like I did this last week. That's not my biggest fear. My biggest fear is getting caught up in my own head and losing control. Keeping this to myself used to put me in some really dark places. The new me is working on accepting these funks as part of being human. This is the beauty of being a human being. Being a human being. That sounds funny, but in reality, this is just my body signaling that something needs to be attended to. And maybe this approach will help you too. I don't know, but I'm just sharing it in case it will. But at the end of the day, accept that you're human, you're not a badass, and that it's okay to not feel okay all the time. It's okay to not be positive all the time. Give yourself permission to feel shitty for a bit, but don't avoid the situation. You just may be making things worse. I encourage you to ditch the armor and get it off your chest with someone you feel comfortable with. And if someone like me is someone you feel comfortable with, shoot me an email over at scotty@perspective-collective.com. I'm more than happy to listen, and I swear on everything I will respond to you. You are not alone, and you are not invisible. Remember that the low moments in our life make us appreciate when things are going right. And believe me, there's going to be a lot of shit that goes wrong in your life, but it's going to make those moments when things are at their peak of happiness, it's going to make it that much more enjoyable, that much more satisfying. So use it all to your advantage and channel it all into your work and your story. Don't be afraid to share these things. You never know who you'll make an impact when you brace that you're human. I realize that these episodes might be getting shorter and shorter, and I'm not going to put a lot of rambling into it like I sometimes do. I'm going to try and trim the fat. I'm really fired up from back-to-back conferences of Creative South and Crop, and I'm just trying to be really more intentional. I'm realizing that some of the words that I'm talking about, at both of these conferences are important conversations to have, and I want you to know that I am in your corner. I'm cheering you on. I got your back. I'm willing to have the hard conversations that other people may not be wanting to talk about. I'm just trying to be transparent and just trying to be a human with you and let you know that I'm not living a highlight reel. There's plenty of shit that I struggle with, and I fuck up all the time. So I just want to be straight and level shit out with you, and I'm always here to listen. And if you want to give back to the show, if it's really leaving an impact on you, the best way you can do this are several ways. By leaving a positive review over on iTunes, that really helps the show get discovered and lets people know what it's about. The second best way, which has been the biggest way that this show has grown, is by just sharing it over on social media. I see it on Twitter, I see it on Instagram, and I can't thank you enough. And finally, the best way to keep this podcast going, as I'm still hustling with the J job and lots of other things in my life I'm trying to keep up with, is by supporting the show over at Patreon Perspective Podcast. $1, $3, $5, $10, whatever per episode really helps this show keep going, lets me evolve it, upgrade equipment, and get it to where I know it can be, where I can make a bigger impact on more people. If you want to find me or, connect with me, you can find me over at Perspective Podcast on Instagram. That's where I'll share the weekly episode artwork, and I'll be sharing some of your work if you've been inspired by the show. I need to give a huge thank you to Nick Jenkins for all the dope freaking music that you hear on this podcast. It is this dude, this talented soul, Nick Jenkins of Blookah. You can find him over at soundcloud.com/Blookah. That's BLOOKAH. And as always, I need to thank you so much for lending me your ears and then just the time out of your existence to connect with me and listen to me. It means the world to me, and I want to encourage you to just keep showing up, keep putting in the work, and keep creating. You got this.